Hello. It's Friday. It's 4 o'clock. It's the Freddie Rand Show. No, it's not. It's Short Fuse. How are you, everybody? Good week. Hope you have been busy. Been a nice weather this week. Unbelievable today in London. And of course, the traffic was just as bad as that. So they were worried. They were worried I wasn't going to make it on time. Little Freddie Rand was going to step in, he told me. He said, boss, I can do it. I said, we'd have to colour correct the whole screen. It would be a disaster for all. Luckily, I made it through. We have got quite a bit going on. Apologies, because we were supposed to have a guest, Tony Lodge, you naughty man. But unfortunately, he's got a great offer, which is to go around the new aircraft carrier down in Portsmouth. So he won't be joining us, but we will still be covering the story. Shout out this week to Alex. Alex, behind the camera. You can nod the camera, Al, to show that you're here. Big shout out to Al. Now, Al has been with us a couple of years, and he has dyslexia, same as my best friend, and spelling was a nightmare. This week, participation. He spelt on his own. Knockout Al. We were like stunned. Far better than any of the journalists. And that's not really a lie either. Be quiet, Pri. So let's talk about what's coming. Obviously, we've got Expo this week, which will be next Thursday. But we'll come to that in a minute. Let's start with our story of the week. So this one you may have seen. It broke in the middle of the week, and it was all about Professor Dieter Helm. And he found, after doing a study about what's going on, lo and behold, why are our energy prices too high? Why are we paying too much? It's because of, drumroll please, the government. So he did a study which said that basically over tinkering in terms of policies, or constant changing by government is actually the reason for this rise in cost. Not climate change policies. It's the endless fiddling around with how you deal with that. And he said that we are in a situation where actually, and you can see it with the price cap stuff, you have so much going on from government that the market is not functioning properly to give people the right prices. He suggests big changes to the whole sort of structure of the energy market in terms of supply and generation. He's saying that, you know, there should be maybe one license, that you get a whole sort of different types of producers and you're all suddenly on the same level playing field, which would be very interesting. He also talked about big changes to the grid. You know, maybe the grid becomes something else, and DSOs, DNOs, the network distributors, and Ofgem. Also, he doesn't believe that Ofgem's doing what it really should be doing. Could it be replaced by something else? So some very interesting points. So my view on this is, you know, I think most people in the business sector will have said, no shit, Sherlock. This is exactly what we've been saying for years. And when you look at business, and I was talking to some senior executives this week, and they basically said, if you left us to get on with it, we would do what we need to do. We would try and keep prices low. We would try and be as sustainable as we can be. And we would make sure we're trying to move into the low carbon technologies. But if you keep changing the goalposts, and if government does this thing of constantly meddling with policy, what happens, as we've reported for years, is investors don't invest. So things don't get done. And then you end up having to penalise to raise money to make the changes that you wanted. So I think Dieter Helm's report is, I don't think it's the panacea, and I don't think he'd agree it's the panacea, but it certainly makes for interesting reading. And the core point that actually, are we paying too much already? Not because of the price of electricity and the source materials, and not even because of the transmission costs, but because we're paying for the amount of money companies are putting aside, and charging us through another way for the policies that the government is putting out. And that's not just this government, successive governments. So I think that's really very interesting. Greg Clark did the classic thing of saying, we will take this under advisement. Well, we'll see what happens. Okay, moving on. This week, as I said, we had the launch of
the T-Charge is part of a package of measures
and we
will lead
talked
to
the Mayor of London,
2019,
Sadiq Khan. Obviously, it's his baby project, a bit like Ken Livingstone introduced the congestion charge. This is his version. And what he really was saying is that this is, according to him, not just a money-making scheme. It really has some teeth because it's about cutting diesel and petrol cars off the roads. Okay, so you have to pass the Euro Standard 4. That generally means, rule of thumb, if your car is older than 2005, it won't pass. My old Golf certainly won't. So if I decide to drive into London next Monday, I would be charged a whopping 22 quid now, something like that, right? So I'd have to pay the congestion charge and this T charge on top. Now, who's going to say we don't want to clean up the roads? No one. Of course we do. It's vital. But the same problem I had with the congestion charge, and I was at the BBC when it was launched way back in, I think it was 2003 or something like that, is that exactly the same thing will happen with this. You'll have people that drive in because they have to, okay? And if they have to drive in, what are they going to do? They're going to either put that cost onto their customers or the delivery firm or whatever, right? Now, I agree that people should be providing themselves with clean transport, okay? Now, I wouldn't drive into central London anymore. I really don't. I get the tube. But I can have that choice. And we did some Vox Pops, very interesting stuff that Johnny did. And people said, good idea, but you're just saying that everyone who has a car older than 2005 has to pay. Well, a lot of people can't afford to pay. It's expensive enough to drive their cars. And will it really deal with the problem? We've still got loads of buses. We've still got loads of lorries. Yeah, we've still got loads and loads. I mean, these new cars are not clean. Just today there was a story about cars that are removing their filters, diesel cars, and because they're so expensive, and then not replacing them and driving around. So unless you have a complete transition to hybrid and eventually electrical vehicles or hydrogen, you're not going to get clean air. So it's a good idea. I think it's just too broad. It just says everyone, and it doesn't take the fact that your ability to pay. I think it should be that if you have, a really big gas guzzler, why should someone driving an enormous, Porsche Cayenne diesel that's got a sort of 4-litre engine or a Range Rover, why should they be exempt because their car is 2015 or 2010? And yet the guy who maybe he's a window cleaner or something like that, or he's delivering some food and he drives an older van, and he's going to get caned for this. So, good idea. I don't think it's fair. And the final point, carrying on with cars, and there's a lot of car stuff going on right now, is this. UK fuel stations have to provide EV charging points. So this was a report, government published bill, Automated and Electric Vehicles Bill, and it basically says motorway service stations, all the big ones, and big service stations around the country should now provide an EV charging point. Hey, that's a bloody good idea, and it's obvious. You should be having that, but they need to be fast chargers. There's no point having a charging point at motorway services, and then you've got to wait 4 hours. Who's going to do that? So unless we get a network of fast chargers, again, this is one of those things that sounds great, but won't quite work. But in principle, it's a very good idea. Well, that's it for now. More stories later with Pri, but let's move on to this week's Viewpoint. So the Viewpoint this week is this story. It is one that was done early in the week. It was a report from the Centre for Policy Studies. Now, who are they? They're a sort of right-wing think tank. I think actually Margaret Thatcher might have started them up. I can't remember. And Tony, who would have been here to discuss this, is one of the authors of this report. What does it say? Right, very simply, it says increasing power imports from Europe threatens Britain's supply. Now, you may know this or you may not know this, but we get a lot of power from Europe. We have these big cables. They're basically pipes called interconnectors, and they connect Britain to mainland Europe. And power goes one way and the other, and gas goes one way and the other, blah, blah, blah. Basically, they're tubes that connect us up to mainland Europe. And when we need power, we draw it in, and when we've got excess, we give it away. Now, the truth is we hardly have any bloody excess. So we are basically always drawing power from these people. So what this report is saying, that with the issues around Brexit, with the rising cost of energy, our reliance on these interconnectors means that we will be more vulnerable to price fluctuations and price spikes. Okay. Now you might think, well, hang on a second, what you're trying to say? If if the energy is cheaper in France, why can't we get it? We'll be fine, whatever. But the point is, you're beholden to other countries, right? We don't have enough energy in this country, of our own. We really don't. So we have to rely on other stuff. Now, you could say, as battery technology gets better and we can get more wind, store it, great, nuclear, once we've got a bit more base load through Hinkley, great. But these are things a long way away. Right now, in the short term, we import loads of LNG, and of course, we take power and gas from the continent. So, a bit like a few years ago when there was a big fracas because Russia and Ukraine had a row, you may remember this, and the gas pipeline was closed off, and that meant prices rocketed, Ukraine was cut off, it was an absolute international nightmare, it was a nightmare for the markets. What this report is saying that if you look at it, this could well happen. Now, I don't think this is utter scaremongering. I think there will be provision, and I think we'll be able to purchase. National Grid are very good at purchasing enough reserve capacity, but this is a legitimate concern that's been raised. Because as you enter the post-Brexit world, the idea that France or Germany or Holland or wherever it is has got some extra power, Scandinavian countries like Denmark, might have a lot of wind or hydro, and then it says, I could put it down the interconnector to Britain, but actually, why wouldn't I trade it with other partners? Am I going to get penalised by a trade deal with Britain? Who knows what we're doing? So the fact is, if you are going to keep taking energy in through just a few points of contact with Europe, if those points of contact decide, hello mate, if you want it, you're going to have to pay more. What are you going to do? You can't do anything about it. You will have to pay more. And so I think this is not a doom and gloom warning, but I think it's a warning we should take quite seriously. And as I said, Tony would have been here, but obviously he had that invite and we can't say no to that. But we'll hopefully get him on the line in the next few weeks to talk about this. Right, that's it. If you agree or disagree, then email me. You can use the hashtag, you can use the blah, 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 you know the score that's on there. It's time this week for the Hack Hutch.
Yes, I have.
She's arrived. Have you got a microphone on?
I think, can you hear me, Alex? Yeah.
He can hear you. It's Priyanka, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Very good.
Looking forward to the weekend. Are you?
Of course I am. Tell me what you've been looking at this week.
Okay, so this week, lots going on as well, as usual. The BEIS Committee, so the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Committee, they were seeking views on the government's recently announced price cap legislation for energy. Yeah. So basically what it wants to know from industry and those interested is whether there should be an absolute price cap, whether it should only focus on the standard variable tariffs and the default tariffs, also how it would impact energy suppliers, investment, the rollout of the smart meters. So you can submit your views until the 29th of November, so that's the deadline. And also the committee will be questioning Energy Secretary Greg Clark on this next Wednesday, which is a day before our conference, Energy Live Expo. So we will be talking about that later in much more detail. But if you haven't already and you're an energy end user,
do my job for me. Keep going. This is great.
We've got limited free tickets available. So make sure you contact Freddie Rand. So his email address is freddie.rand@energylivenews.com. So make sure you don't miss that because we've got loads of content.
No, but let's go back onto this point.
Yep.
Right? So obviously this is Theresa May putting it out there. This is very interesting. What they're saying is we want feedback. What they're saying is we don't know how to do this.
Well, the committee is there to scrutinise and get the opinion of experts in the industry. So basically that's the process they're going through.
Read that for we don't know how to do this. Okay. But it is interesting that they're going to get suppliers and look at it. And you look at the standard variable tariff. That's the one that most people are concerned about.
Because it's said to be the most expensive on the market.
Exactly. But then again, the problem with price caps, and here at ELN, we don't think it's a good idea. The reason is that if you have a price cap, you're basically going to make sure that people will price that in. So the deals that are out there will get less. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens when he gives evidence. Right, moving on. What else have we got?
Next up, we've got stuff on fracking. So the Scottish Parliament finally voted on the Scottish Government's decision earlier this month on its position to ban fracking across Scotland. So it voted in favour of the Scottish Government's proposal. And I believe it followed an extensive consultation by the Scottish Government, and they found that 99% of people were opposed to fracking, and less than 1% actually supported the controversial technique.
But that question was raised in Parliament, wasn't it?
Yes, so that was raised in Parliament during the PMQs. So one of the Scottish ministers questioned the Prime Minister.
And said, do it in the rest of the UK.
And said, why don't you do it in England? And basically she said, that's because it's good for the UK. And she said the government will actually be setting out further proposals to support fracking in England.
So you're going to have a real sort of, I wouldn't say the word, but there's going to be a big difference of opinion and animosity between if mainland, the rest of England and Wales does fracking and Scotland doesn't.
Scotland hasn't. Actually, Wales has actually also proposed to end fracking, but it's only the Scottish Parliament who's confirmed it so far. But it's only England, so the UK government hasn't actually put forward their stance on, or a bit of stance on actually going against the technique. So I guess that's not going to happen anytime soon.
Okay.
So obviously, as expected, we have green groups who have asked the government to rethink its support for fracking in England, and they've sent a letter to Energy Secretary Greg Clark, basically suggesting that it's not good for climate and for the carbon targets to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. Moving on, this week we also went to the launch of the Smart Power Industries Alliance.
Right, yes, this was an interesting one.
Yeah, so basically it's an alliance of a number of energy organizations across industry. So that includes IT providers, National Grid, those who supply flexible power, trade bodies. So it's a great mix of people in the industry. So they've come together and they've said we're going to help create a market for smart technologies to help push this agenda forward for a low carbon, flexible and smart energy system in the UK. Which is quite interesting. So they also say that they aim to give consumers better control over how and when they use their energy.
Right, okay. Anything else?
And finally, Halloween's around the corner.
Halloween.
I'm sure some of you have costumes ready or hoping to get it ready this weekend.
Yes.
Apparently, it's a horror for sustainability. If you, what's that about?
Yes, go on.
So it's a horror for
It's a
sustainability.
horror for comedy, this one, but go on.
So apparently last year, 7 million costumes ended up in the bin. So there's a new campaign that's been launched to basically encourage people to recycle or swap their costumes with friends and family members and save them from a frightful end.
God.
That was good, wasn't it?
That was really
That was a good end
worst,
to
wasn't
my
it?
all
The frightful
policy.
end.
So
God.
basically
So
that's
if you
what
have
we
a
have.
Freddy Krueger, not a Freddy Rand mask, if you've got any other bits of weird crap that are there, basically what you're saying is let's go back to the 70s where we just made things from bits of garbage and kept it.
That's basically what they're saying.
Excellent, lovely. Next week, what's happening?
Next week is Energy Live Expo.
Wow, I can't believe it.
But before that, if you've got any stories, send it over to me and Johnny, and the email address is stories@energylivenews.com.
Stories at Energy Live News. Yeah. Thank you very much, Pri.
Thank you.
Please take your microphone
Have
off
a good
quietly
weekend.
without shuffling and making endless noise. No, in all seriousness, I did like that story about the Halloween, so that is a bit freaky to do that. So, as she said, yes, indeed, it is that time. Next Thursday will be Energy Live Expo. We've been trailing it, we've been going on about it. Frankly, you're probably sick to death of it. But don't miss it. We are really looking forward to this. It's going to be a cracking event. We've got a lot of stuff going on. And also, more importantly, we have got a big surprise at the end of the day. So you've got to be there to see it. So just before the drinks, there's something going on that really you don't want to miss. So that's all taking place next week at the QE2. And what we'll be doing is there will be no short fuse next Friday. I know. But the good news is on the Thursday, we will be live from the expo. Well, I won't be, Pre will be. And we'll be doing lots of interviews with people throughout the day. So just keep watching on Twitter, keep watching on our YouTube channel, and we'll be reporting live from the conference, bringing you interviews with big name speakers and getting the views of the delegates. Right, that's about it. Before I go, shout outs, Fredo.
Yeah, I think Kevin Corcoran wasn't very happy with Free's joke.
Kevin Corcoran wasn't happy.
No, he's grown.
Did he? Did he groan? I thought Kevin was going to groan a lot anyway, but you know, he does, yeah. And there are two things that Kevin worries about a lot. One is groaning, and the other one he knows as well. But hopefully these two things will be taken care of very soon. So Kev, you know what? We'll just keep watching out for you. Eye to eye, we'll balance it all up. And before I go, this and finally is the best, right? Star Wars. Here we go. It's not the droid we're looking for. Oh no, oh shit, it is. Some graffiti artist has done, I think, the best bit of graffitiing ever since, you know, the days of like, God, what was it called? The one, the little, they were so young, the little bloke who used to stand over the wall. Can't remember his name, but Kevin will remember him. In the 70s, they used to do this little character that was everywhere. This is even better. An old nuclear bunker ventilation port has been turned into R2-D2. It's so good. They even, right, so they did this overnight. Now, this is, I mean, I like what Banksy does, but frankly, that is pants compared to this. So they must have gone in, graffitied the hell out of this, and then added the legs. So they added the legs, the little side bits weren't on it. So they poured concrete and put these little legs on it. I think that's the best bit of energy stuff. I know it's not strictly an energy story, but hey, we liked it. It was a cracking one. Well, that's about it. As I said, we will see you next week at Expo. Do have a lovely weekend from the whole team here. Adios.